We are recording the interview of Don Barker. This interview is being conducted by Cameron Barberry from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. Also in attendance is Don Barker. This interview is being recorded at Wright State. It is 1:43 p.m. on 7 September 2017. So, Don, where were you born? Where are you from?
Beverly, Massachusetts is where I was born. All of my brothers were born there. Our family actually was in transition at the time when I was born. So I actually went and lived with my aunt and uncle when I was a baby because they were still looking for a house.
Oh, goodness. And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have or had two brothers. I lost one when he was 42 in 2004. But my next younger brother just finished a 30-odd year career in police.
Oh, wow. So retired. Do you have any other family members that were in the military?
No.
First
No.
one.
Yeah, my dad tried, but he had a heart murmur, so they wouldn't take him.
Goodness. And
He lived to be 87.
what were their occupations, your parents?
My father was a machinist, master machinist, as well as a microwave engineer. And my mother never worked. She just took care of the home, raised us youngins.
And what were you doing before you entered the service?
I had just got out of high school.
High school and where at?
Hamilton, Massachusetts.
Okay. So were you drafted or did you go in on your own?
I chose to enlist. I went in on the delayed enlistment program, so I enlisted in April, and when I graduated in June, I was waiting for a slot in basic training, and they finally got me a slot July 9th,
What year was that?
1971.
1971. What was your experience like going into basic?
It was different. I had traveled before, so the travel part wasn't a big deal, but the Texas heat and the different night sounds from the different bugs I'd never heard a katydid before, and just completely different. The heat.
So your time in basic was again what month and what year?
July through August of 1971.
So how was that going from the family side to fresh into the military?
It was quite a shock at first because I'd never lived with 50 other guys in an open bay barracks with no air conditioning, things like that. It was very different. And of course, like most people, I got a little homesick, but I powered through. I managed to get through. Even though I got two left feet, I managed to learn how to march, learn how to salute.
And then you went to, what was your...
I went to Keesler Air Force Base, where I studied electronics and avionic, inertial navigation, and radar systems. It's a big mouthful, but what I ended up doing is Doppler navigation. And we just called ourselves the Doppler Troops.
And was that Doppler on the ground, or was that
Airborne?
Airborne Doppler?
Yeah. And the systems I worked on, I worked some C-130 units, but mostly it was KC-135 and B-52s.
Wow. And so that was your tech school. What was your first duty station?
My first duty station, they sent me to Pease in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, just 45 minutes from home. I got there in June of 1972, and I got orders for Thailand in December of 1972.
So 6 months at your first duty station.
Yeah, well, they asked where you wanted to go, and I said Pease, and they sent me. But they didn't say how long I was going to stay.
So what was it like after tech school, going to your first duty station, getting adjusted before going to your deployment?
Well, it was an easy adjustment. The guy that was the shop chief, his last name was Junkins. He was a really nice guy, and he took good care of me when I processed in. He took me over to the supply, got my tools and my cold weather gear and all of that. And he was right there by my side teaching me, what I needed to know. Because we didn't study this particular system in tech school. We'd never even seen it. So I get there and it's all different. And I got to learn all of it.
So they set you up with a completely new system
Yeah,
at the time?
yeah. So they taught me everything.
And so you said it only took 6 months. When you first, did you have to go through acclimation training before you went to your first deployment?
No, no. And in fact, I wasn't done being trained when they sent me to Thailand. I had to continue training when I got there. And it was tough because we were working 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 6 days a week. And we were flying airplanes 24/7. So you get an airplane that comes back broke and you got to fix it. And you're still learning how.
Did you fly with the planes, or did you stay on the ground?
We were all ground, yeah.
Okay. So how was that first deployment, your experience going through?
That was an enormous change because it's a foreign country. Completely different from anything you'd ever seen, smelled, heard, felt. We got off the airplane. It was January. We were all in our dress blues. Inside the aircraft, it was comfortable. Outside the aircraft, it was 90 degrees with 70% humidity. Your uniform looked like a bag of rags by the time you were done. Never so happy to have fatigues on instead of the wool uniform.
So what did you guys do? I know you said you worked the 12 hours. What was your days like?
We would come into the shop. We would take over from the other shift. And if they hadn't finished a job, we'd go out and relieve the guys and take over, finish the job. Otherwise, we just pick up the new stuff that came along or repair stuff on the bench in the shop. And that could be interesting because the equipment was all big power tubes and it would heat the space up, and that plus the heat outside. We had these great huge air conditioner units that were run on a big diesel engine that pumped more cool air into the building, because originally they designed the building with air conditioning, but they never calculated the heat load from all of that equipment. So it would, in the middle of the night, I was on night shift most of the time, in the middle of the night, when we'd fixed everything and everything had slowed down, it would get bloody cold in there. But by the time the sun come up, and it was up an hour or so, it would get warm again.
So what did you guys do on your off time while you're deployed?
Well, when I first got there, I did some exploring around the base, and I went over to the USO and found out they have TV, satellite TV type of thing, full feeds, so you can watch home. They had, food, including ice cream sundaes if you wanted one. But then I got together with the guys and we started going downtown and hitting the bars and having fun and getting wasted. The thing that 20-year-old guys often do. But we had a lot of fun. And I met a girl and fell in love and got permission to marry her. It lasted a year and a half.
Did you bring her home with you, or?
I did. Yep. She came home. My parents were excited. They found her to be a lovely girl and they loved her to pieces. Worked out for a while, but she got tired of my lifestyle, my little problems that I've had throughout my life. I suffer chronic depression. She couldn't handle it, so she walked out, filed divorce. I gave it to her, no contest. I mean, if she's unhappy, why make her worse?
Now, I understand you met your wife while you were deployed, but how did you keep in contact with people back home while you were deployed?
Most of it was through letters, but we did start sending cassette tapes back and forth so we could hear each other's voices. And so I would send them an update on what I was doing, and they would send back questions about different things, and we just conversed back and forth that way. It was so much easier than trying to write it all down.
And get more information out.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you were there, was there anything that happened that I know you guys were where you were at? Did you have any conflict happen on post?
There was one conflict that happened before I got there in December. There was a sapper that came over the fence, and they started throwing satchel charges around, but didn't actually do any real damage, minor damage only, and the Thai guards got them. And that's the only one I remember.
So that happened before?
Just before I got there, yeah.
Well, so you didn't see any combat actually
No.
in alrighty. Now, how was the camaraderie there in your deployed location?
Everybody really looked out for each other. It was a really close-knit community. After work, it was always, we stop by a place called Grunt's Grove and we have a beer and watch the big python and the monkeys. And they had 2 monkeys and a big old python named Pete. And so we'd make bets on when Pete was going to eat a chicken. The winner gets a case of beer, that sort of thing. But, we were close. There was great camaraderie. I had a very good friend who worked in the fire control shop, tearing down the machine guns in the tail and refurbishing them. And we spent a lot of time downtown just listening to music, drinking beer, having a good time. So we had good friends, made good friends.
That's good. Now, when your time was finishing up there, how was it knowing that you're going to be going back home?
I don't know whether you've ever done it, but we had what we called a short calendar. And when you were within 6 months, you started counting off the days, marking them off. And you get down to the last few days and you're running around seeing people and you say, short, I'm so short I could free fall from the bed, that sort of thing. So it was fun. We made a lot of fun out of it. But you really did look forward to the end of your deployment and a new base and a new start. So it was different.
Now, coming home from that deployment, how was that?
Well, first of all, it was a weird trip because I got rerouted through Japan and had to stay like 8 hours in Yokota, Japan, waiting for another aircraft. And then that aircraft was chock-a-block full, so there was just about enough room for the wife and I. And it was another long flight because they stopped at Eielson in Alaska before they got back to California. And arriving in California, of course, we were dead beat and felt grubby. But the airport in San Francisco had facilities where travelers could go shower up, clean up, shave up, whatever you needed, and put fresh clothes on and so forth before your next flight, which is, of course, we took advantage of that quickly because, feel grubby. But unlike many of the returnees, I didn't have a problem with people yelling epithets or anything like that. But then again, we came in late at night type of thing. But it was interesting trying to get used to being home again, because Thailand, compared to the United States at the time, was pretty primitive. And so you get back and you got to get used to being able to get all of the things you used to get. Driving your own car. That was fun.
So you're back home. What was the transition? What was it like being home right after a long deployment, especially with a brand new wife?
It was, well, for me, I just was so happy to be back in my family, see my parents, see my brothers, and of course there was a little bit of nervousness bringing home a wife. They'd never met her at all, only seen her picture, But overall, it It was a very joyous reunion. We had a lot of fun. And of course, I took my wife various places, showed her different things, taught her how to drive. That was an experience.
Now, you're back home.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? Basically, transitioning from being in a deployed location to being back home. I know you touched on it a little bit, but did you just dive right back in, back to work, or?
Yeah, I tried to. I was on a 30-day leave when I got back, so I tried to just reassimilate into the world the way it was before I left, and kind of get myself prepared for my next duty station.
Where were you stationed at after?
I went to K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Marquette, Michigan. Cold. I couldn't believe it. My Thai wife did not mind the cold. I thought she would freeze to death, Here I am buying her heavy clothes and stuff. She didn't mind it. I was surprised.
And was that your only deployment?
Yeah. Well, actually, I went to England a few years later for a 2-year tour to Mildenhall.
Okay. So, you're at Sawyer. What was the job like of being now in Michigan?
The basic part of the job was almost the same. The aircraft was a different model. These were H models, the latest model, as opposed to the D models that we were working on. So equipment was in slightly different places. But being a newer aircraft, it was a little cleaner to work on. It hadn't accumulated quite so much grime from the years. Working in the cold weather was extremely different from the hot weather of Thailand. And there was one incident where I literally got a tool stuck to my hand and couldn't let go until I put it inside my jacket to warm it up. You had to be careful of that, because when it was cold, you could freeze. You could get frostbite real quick.
And were there any injuries like that that happened? I know you said it was.
Oh yeah,
be careful.
Yeah, we saw a lot of minor frostbite. Very rarely did you see a major because of the uniforms that they issued us extra warm stuff, and it was everybody knew to check each other, ears and nose to make sure you weren't freezing. And if you showed any signs, you were supposed to get off the flight line. But the in-shop work was, basically the same stuff, because the units were identical.
And you said that you went to England directly after that?
Yeah, I left in July of 1975 to deploy to RAF Mildenhall. And I thought, I'm out of SAC. Wrong. They had tons of tankers coming and going, and those were what I worked on most.
And so what was it like going over there? You're stateside, used to seeing a lot of the American people. Now you're in England. How was that transition?
That was different. They speak the same language, sort of. They drive on the wrong side of the road, and they drink a lot more than even we did when I was in Thailand. But all in all, like the Thai people, the English are just lovely folks. They love to meet the GI and say hello. I got invited to eat with people. We actually got invited to help work on a little riding school, Western style riding school, just down the road from the base. We helped them with, putting up hay and so forth. We ate with them and we had a great time. And of course, being a history buff, I explored some of the places where, the generation before me had flown their aircraft from. And most of those airfields have been turned back to the farm fields, but I explored whatever ones I could. It was very interesting. And I did learn to drive English style.
Just checking on the thing there. Now, what did you do after England? You were still in?
Yep, I went back to K.I. Sawyer, believe it or not. Pardon me. Yeah, I went back to K.I. Sawyer. I still had 3 years left on my enlistment, and I had a choice. I could choose the Northern Tier base, and it was a guaranteed 6-year tour. So I knew that if I chose the base, and I knew Sawyer well and liked the area, I knew that I wouldn't move again until the end of my enlistment. And if I decided to re-enlist, then I'd stay there another 3 years before they moved me. So it was stability at that point that I was looking for, because I've been traveling. So I chose to go back there, and I don't regret it. I met some great guys again, and actually formed a country band.
There you go. Now, did you retire?
No, my second enlistment ran out, and I just went back to civilian life. I had thought about re-enlisting, and I was up for a 4th stripe, and in fact I got a 93 on the written test, and I thought, I've got it made. The guy I worked for, he never liked me very much. He told the commanding officer I didn't deserve it. So I didn't get my 4th stripe, and of course that annoyed me a little bit. Can you imagine jumping up and down and screaming, "You son of a..." So I made my decision to leave and go back to civilian life.
And how was that transition going from military to now civilian life?
It's been, even today, I look at people and I say, really? There's no discipline, the camaraderie isn't there. I miss that. But the whole transition, going back home, being with the family, and getting a real job in the real world and so forth, it was an interesting transition, but it wasn't difficult for me. The job I got was in electronics, working with similar equipment that I was working with in the Air Force. In fact, I was working for a company making the magnetrons, which is the heart of a radar system, and they got a contract from the Air Force to create a new magnetron for the system I used to work on. So I got to help on that.
So you said you went into doing that. Did you ever use your GI Bill, or did you just go straight into work?
I didn't. I thought about using it, but with the training that I got at Keesler and all of the training that I picked up along the way, I decided that, going back to school, what for? I can make a good living this way. And after a couple of years at the company working on testing the magnetrons, then building the test equipment, I was invited to join the drafting department. So I learned drafting, later taught myself CAD. I made a good career out of what Uncle Sam had given me. So I can't complain.
Going into that, I was going to say, how do you feel that your experience deployed has affected your life overall? Looking back from the start to now.
I think perhaps it's broadened my understanding of the world and people, because you run into this foreign culture. You're still not even 21 years old, and you jump into this foreign culture, and you have to learn to get along and meet people and so forth. And then going to England, the old sod, where we come from, I think it just makes you a better person ultimately. I think it did a world of good to me.
Sorry, I'm just going through here.
Mm-hmm.
Life lessons that you learned through the military.
I think the biggest life lesson was the discipline, the self-discipline to make sure that, you do your job, you do it the best you can. You're always early to work, eager to work, willing to stay. Those things made it much easier when I come out in the civilian world, because I was that much ahead as far as, the other people. They were kind of, so what? but I was there every day, on time, ready to work, willing to stay if we needed to, willing to come in early. I think it did me well. I think it stood me really well over the years.
Really went over that one. What message would you like to leave for the future generation who will view or hear this interview?
Well, I would hope that future generations would make similar choices if offered the opportunity to enlist, find out where your skill sets lie, and follow that course. Serve your country, serve it well, serve with honor. Because it is an honor for us to be veterans and active duty. It's an honor. Not everybody can be a soldier or a sailor or Marine, airman. It's a great honor. This is a great nation, and they need great people. So for the future generation, consider that ability to serve the nation as the highest honor you can achieve, and do what you can.
Now I know that you're here for you guys the reunion. How else have you kept in contact with some of the guys that you've served with?
There are a few that I've kept in touch with. I haven't seen some of the guys, but I've contacted them through Facebook, and we've had conversations. And one of them, it was a childhood friend of mine, or a teenage friend of mine, and we just got back in touch just before I moved to North Carolina, and I keep in touch with him. He also served in the Air Force, and he made a career out of it. But I know him from school. He and I used to pick together. But I try to keep in touch with most of the guys through the Facebook, and we're also linked through Together We Served. I don't know whether you've ever heard of that website, but it's a great place for veterans to put their experience, like similar to what you're doing. You write out your experience, and it gets shared through the community, and you might find some old buddies, and it's certainly worthwhile to belong to.
I'm sorry.
But I try to keep in touch with as many of these guys as I can, basically through Facebook.
And have you found anybody that through that website, Together We Served, that you weren't able to get in contact through Facebook?
One person, and he's here now. And it was surprising, because I didn't realize that we both served in Thailand until I read his bio, and I said, "Oh, wow!" So I messaged him, and we're wingmen.
So is there anything that you want to add that we haven't discussed throughout this interview that you would like to say?
Really, the only thing I could add is most of us are suffering from various illnesses that probably link directly to the herbicides that were used in Thailand that our government won't acknowledge. And I know one fella who served on Guam who has been interviewed by several newspapers. He was one of the guys that actually sprayed Agent Orange all over Guam, all over the northern tip where Anderson Air Force Base is. And I would hope that congressmen and senators would hear our stories and help us to get the recognition we deserve. If you were boots on the ground in Nam, you automatically get your recognition for Agent Orange illnesses, but not Thailand, and we use just as much of it. So I would hope that future generations would learn from our mistakes, for one thing. Don't play with chemicals you don't understand. And I would hope that currently there would be more activity in trying to help us to overcome our illnesses.
Well, this concludes our interview. I really do appreciate you coming out here and giving your interview.
I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
And I would like to thank you for your service again.
Thank you.
Thank you.